What's up, Rebels? It is Chunky Monkey 40 here, and today we're going to be talking about Michigan's forgotten town, Plainfield. Plainfield is located northeast of Stockbridge, but northwest of Gregory. There isn't much of anything out there nowadays, but at one point there was. Up into the 1800s, the site that would become Plainfield was mostly inhabited by Native Americans as a popular camping spot due to the plain fields. In 1835, two men from New Jersey, Levi Clausen and Jacob Dunn, came to Michigan, purchased some land, and settled. 1 year later, they were joined by Philip Dyer. Upon Dyer's arrival, the town would adapt the name Dyersburg. This did not last long, considering in 1837 they established the Plainfield Post Office, after a New Jersey town of the same name. The post office was located in the back room of the New Idea building. That building was upscaled and rebuilt in the 1880s into the building that we see today. After the establishment of the post office, that's when Plainfield started to grow quite a bit. At the town's prime, Plainfield had two saloons, one owned by Philip Dyer, and the other was owned by Jacob Dunn. A school, two general stores, the co-op shop, stave and planing mill, Presbyterian church with an attached cemetery, Methodist church, and two blacksmith shops. The town's main role was to supply grains and fruits that were exported out of Gregory. They had to transport it to Gregory because when they implemented the railroad, it went through Gregory and Stockbridge, but it bypassed Plainfield and another town south of Gregory, Unadilla, in the process. For that very reason, Plainfield and Unadilla could not keep up with the growth of Stockbridge and Gregory. With the railroad being in Stockbridge and Gregory, this caused a lot of businesses to relocate out of Plainfield and Unadilla to get closer to the railroad. Nowadays, much of what Plainfield once was is now gone, but some of it still remains. Plainfield's Methodist Church is actually still active to this day. The Methodist Church was originally built sometime in the early 1800s, but unfortunately, it was burnt down in the early 1900s. They rebuilt the church in 1906, and that is the church that we see standing to this day. The church rebuild was probably right about the time when Plainfield started to reach its peak of success, and I say that because in 1913, the Plainfield Post Office was closed down. Now, the building where the Plainfield Post Office was located remained open. That was part of the Plainfield Farm Bureau. Eventually, the Plainfield Farm Bureau would become a dealer for Alice Chalmers and New Idea farm equipment. This kept people still coming through Plainfield, and it even led to the construction and opening of the Plainfield station in the late 1940s. This was just your typical party store that you'd see anywhere, supplying some basic goods and candies you'd find in any general store for the time. The Plainfield station actually put the co-op shop out of business sometime in the late 1980s. The reason for that was because people were spending less money at the co-op shop than the Plainfield station. Plus, as Gregory grew, it became more profitable for Plainfield residents to sell their goods there, considering the bigger population. After the co-op shop closed down in the late 1980s, everything stayed pretty consistent for the most part in Plainfield up until the economic downfall of 2008. This is when Alice Chalmers stopped selling tractors at the Plainfield Farm Bureau, and the Plainfield station couldn't afford to remain in business. After all of that happened, a plan came about to move the co-op shop to the Fowlerville Fairgrounds, but the funds were never there to move it because of the 2008 recession. In 2021, there isn't much more that is known about the town of Plainfield. Most of the buildings, such as the mills and blacksmith shops, have been torn down and built over with little records left behind. This garage, for example, it sits on the ground of one of the blacksmith shops. The one-room schoolhouse is also long gone and once stood on the east side of the Plainfield Cemetery. If you are actually standing at the front gate of the cemetery and then you look out to your left, out into that field, that is where the Presbyterian church would have stood. That one barn with the Plainfield Farm Bureau sign at the top is practically unrecognizable at first glance because of the vines that are absorbing the building. It was built sometime in the early 1900s, acting as a warehouse to store more farm goods that wouldn't fit in the main two buildings. The craftsmanship that went into this old barn is great, and I love how the original signage is still there on the building too. You know, it's a wonder to really think about, what could Livingston County look like in 2021 had the railroad gone through Plainfield and Unadilla rather than Stockbridge and Gregory. If you do decide to go out to Plainfield, please be respectful of the area and also respect the residents if you meet any of them. And if you know more about the history of Plainfield, please don't be shy to hit me up on any of my social medias. I am on Facebook and Instagram, and I'd love to learn more about the town. Let me know what you think of this video, alongside if there are more small towns or abandoned places in the area that I should do a video on. I plan to make this a regular thing on the channel, so be sure to subscribe down below. Stay tuned for more, and of course, stay rebel.
Just some good old boys, never meaning no harm. Beats all you ever saw in trouble.